Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the micro-mechanisms of riots, communal polarization, and everyday politics. We're going to break down some incredibly rigorous academic fieldwork to figure out exactly how political identities are engineered right from the ground up. Our roadmap for this deep dive is a phenomenal book by anthropologist Suman Nath called Democracy and Social Cleavage in India. And what makes this text an absolute game changer is that it isn't just some armchair philosophy. Now, this is longitudinal, multi-site ethnographic research. Nath actually spent years immersing himself in the shifting political landscape of West Bengal to decode how South Asian identity politics actually operate on the ground. Here's what we're going to cover. First, the Bengal political shift. Second, grounded ethnographic research. Third, the end of party society. Fourth, the rise of cultural misrecognition. Fifth, the post-truth catalyst. And finally, the future of democracy. All right, part one, the Bengal political shift. We'll be tracing the evolution of West Bengal's political landscape. So, for about 3.5 decades under left-front rule, Bengal operated under what Nath calls a party society. Basically, this era relied on something called systemic misrecognition. That means the party machinery was so robust, so ingrained, that it literally superseded religion and caste. People just looked to the party for everything. But contrast that old system with where we are now, identity consolidation. This new era is driven by cultural misrecognition, where religious polarization and identity issues have absolutely taken center stage. It's a massive, fundamental shift in how society functions. Moving on to part two, grounded ethnographic research. Let's look at the actual micro-mechanisms of polarization.
Now, the crucial thing to remember here is that Nath didn't just sit back and look at macro-level data. He spent countless hours at casual, everyday spots like tea stalls and river ghats, just listening to normal conversations. And then he took it a step further. He went deep into the jute mill belts like Bhatpara and the coal belts around Asansol. Most intensely, though, he conducted his fieldwork right inside social media-led riot zones. By physically embedding himself in these raw, volatile environments, he uncovered how incredibly complex networks of local stakeholders, politicians, and identity groups actually manufacture conflict.
Okay, part three, the end of party society. This is the transition from systemic governance to identity politics. To really grasp the vacuum that allowed identity politics to rise, we need to define that term I mentioned earlier, systemic misrecognition. During the dominant party rule, people completely took party-controlled governance for granted. You subscribe to the party to get your everyday public services like health, education, essential resources, and by doing so, other foundational identities like religion were naturally pushed into the background. But when that party hegemony finally eroded and collapsed, it created a massive vacuum at the grassroots level. And that vacuum paved the way for those long-suppressed identity issues to powerfully reemerge. Which brings us to part four, the rise of cultural misrecognition. We're going to visualize the theoretical flows of this political transition. The first mechanism, Nath points out, begins with the construction of a glorious past. This narrative gets spoken over and over again in the public sphere until people start feeling like it's actually achievable today. And the result? It translates directly into a collective belief in a single leader or a single dominant ideology. It's a very carefully crafted psychological flow. Then there's another fascinating mechanism, the promotion of fairs and festivals. We're talking about funding massive cultural spectacles right at the grassroots level. Now, while these might seem totally harmless or even celebratory, the anthropological effect is wild. They create a forgetful public sphere. Real policy issues like jobs, education, and healthcare are completely bypassed. The public sphere essentially gets distracted by cultural celebration, leading to what Nath calls structural amnesia regarding their actual material interests. And all of this builds into aggressive nationalism. This utilizes cultural misrecognition to seamlessly connect religious symbols, like temples, directly to the concept of the nation. By bridging these two concepts, questioning one is suddenly framed as an attack on the other. This just further entrenches that forgetful public sphere we talked about, solidifying identity way above objective policy. Ultimately, when identity-based narratives become a normal part of everyday life and daily routine, violence against the perceived other becomes normalized. Nath's research observes that these hate crimes and localized riots essentially turn into public performances. Violence, tragically, becomes a tool to further consolidate identity. Next up is part 5, the post-truth catalyst. Let's explore how modern tools are accelerating these historical divides. Take a look at this. 50,000 WhatsApp groups and 10,000 dedicated employees just in one state alone. Those numbers are absolutely staggering. The smartphone revolution basically allowed political IT cells to completely bypass traditional media. They were able to cultivate and spread communal divides directly into people's pockets, utilizing morphed images and intensely emotionally charged content at a scale that's frankly hard to wrap your head around. So, how exactly does this post-truth machinery actually work? Well, it breaks down into 4 steps. First, it subverts the truthfulness of basic facts. Second, it taps into people's existing confirmation bias to trigger strong emotions like anger or fear. Third, it establishes those lies as deeply emotional alternative facts. And finally, it completely dissolves the boundaries between reality and fantasy. When that condition is achieved, objective facts become way less important than belief and emotion, making it incredibly easy to just manufacture localized riots. What's really fascinating and frankly quite sobering about Nath's findings is the parallel, simultaneous rise of these fundamentalist movements feeding off one another. On one side, we see a rise in mosque-based Sharia organizations that actively overwrite older, syncretic Sufi and peer traditions. At the exact same time, we see the proliferation of Ram Navami rallies and new Hanuman temples overriding local, traditional cultural practices. Both sides are highly organized, deeply institutionalized, and use specific cultural markers to edge out secular democratic forces. Finally, we reach part 6, the future of democracy. The big question: will service delivery overcome identity polarization? Now, despite everything we've talked about, the research does point out a powerful counter-narrative. Service delivery pays. Recent electoral shifts have shown us that when political entities focus heavily on practical grassroots governance, things like universal health insurance or delivering essential services directly to doorsteps, it can still effectively push back against cultural misrecognition. It proves that polarization doesn't always guarantee an electoral dividend, especially if the public's real, tangible, material interests are aggressively met. Which leaves us with a critical question to ponder. Has identity polarization permanently replaced the democratic delivery of services? Or is this just a volatile transitional phase in a long political evolution? Suman Nath's incredibly detailed ethnography gives us the tools to spot the mechanisms at play. But the final outcome? That's still writing itself. I highly recommend checking out his text directly to explore the deep complexities of these micro-mechanisms. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and always keep questioning the narratives around you.